Well, I don't really need my formal introduction then. I can just thank the two of you for being here today. I know that there's a lot of other things that are going on, and I appreciate you both taking the time to come and listen to what I have to say. My second paragraph goes on for those of you who may not know much about me, but I think that you both have a generally good idea of who I am. My name is Gretchen Hughes, and I completed my 4 years of undergrad here at CSBSJU, and I now work as a fellow for the Intercultural and International Student Services Department, in addition to being a resident director with CSB Residential Life. I'm here today because a few years ago, while taking a leadership seminar with Professor John Hasselberg, I read a book. And this book was called The Story Factor, and I found myself agreeing with and relating to a lot of its content. Ever since then, I've had a desire and a goal to find ways to communicate and share some of my life experiences and how I've learned from them through telling stories. My hope is that when you both, and Jenny, you too, when you leave here today, that has sparked some part of your curiosity to discover and some of your imagination to share some of your own stories and what they mean for you and for others you may share them with. The stories that I'll be sharing with you today come from my time in Alaska, China, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. These stories I've learned lessons from, and they've impacted who I am and how I view the world. As I go through each of the 3 stories, I've provided pictures to help aid your imagination and to connect you to my experience. Now, I realize that my stories aren't the end-all, be-all, and they're not always going to be enough to allow people to see and value the importance behind learning through story. So I've also included some research on storytelling that I've collected over the past few months. Following my stories and this research, my hope is to begin a conversation about how we here at CSBSJU can begin to better or more often utilize story to connect individuals, strengthen our empathy, and build understanding. So the summer following my second year at CSBSJU, 2 of my friends and I decided to try our luck working at a salmon fishery in Naknek, Alaska. We'd heard the stories both good and bad, and we were ready for adventure. For the first 2 months, I was employed at Leader Creek Fisheries. The first 14 of those days were like summer camp. It was at Camp Leader Creek. We had no priorities, we had no deadlines, so we spent our time making friends and exploring the town. The town consisted of 1 gas station, 1 really exciting grocery store, and 1 historical society that was historically always closed. The following 18 days were some of the most physically challenging of my entire life. My daily schedule consisted of a 5 a.m. wake up, a 6 a.m. beginning work shift, 16 hours later getting off at 10 p.m., and going to sleep anywhere from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. I literally ate, breathed, and dreamed salmon. Now I have these little thought bubbles every once in a while that are going to pop up, and they come from my journals. So when I was kind of revisiting my stories, I took quotes from what I thought when I was there. So they'll pop up every once in a while. Following these 16-hour shifts, or 16ers, we went down to 12-hour shifts, and I finished out my final 30 days. Now there's many different kinds of individuals that work at salmon fisheries for many varieties of reasons. The experience, to say you did, for internships, or for many, myself included, the money. I was told when I began that all the Filipino workers did coke, and that's how they could stay awake and focus through their shift. This wasn't necessarily uncommon, since many of the others whom I worked with took prescription drugs like Adderall to stay awake. One particular day, my assumptions got the best of me and taught me a thing or two about jumping to conclusions. Most of the Filipinos who I'd been advised to steer clear of, since they dealt in hard drugs versus the soft prescription drugs that other people were taking, well, they like to work together. On this particular day, their team needed extra help, and I was shifted over from the packing department to work with them. We were working on sorting portions, which is exactly what it sounds like, little square portions of salmon, and our job was to sort them based off our instructions into grade A or grade B. For 12 hours we did this. When I came back, I started relating my class time into my work shift, so an 85-minute class seems a lot. less intense versus a 12-hour work shift. And it worked really well because completing the same task for 12 hours without talking to other people is impossible. So I got to know those I was working with quite well. We were all laughing and joking by the end, and I was feeling relieved that these crackheads that I had stereotyped them out to be weren't who I thought they were. We're all packing up to leave, and one of the guys, Brian, turns to me and he says, "Hey, Gretchen, do you want some Coke?" And I looked at him, and I was shocked. Excuse me? He looks back at me and he goes, "Yeah, do you want some Coke?" And I was like, I didn't know what to say. He said, "No, thank you." And he goes, "Oh, come on, it's my birthday," as he proceeds to pull out a 12-pack of Coca-Cola to share with the rest of our team. Now, whether Brian has or continues to do cocaine is none of my business. And this was one of the first times I began to question what someone had told me about who others are, taking someone else's word for truth about what certain people do or do not do without having any knowledge myself. Alaska was my first push outside of my comfort zone, the first experience that really challenged the core of my being. And after that, I suppose you could say, all pun intended, I was hooked on experiences that expanded my understanding of life and the ways there are to live it. So this thirst for adventure is what led me to China and to the Center for Global Education's Summer Global Internship Programs. My journey for China began the summer following my junior year at CSBSJU, and I spent the entirety of spring semester working on a way to fund my internship and living expenses abroad. Turns out finding funding for me meant taking on 8 credits, making me an intern 40 hours a week, a part-time CSBSJU student, and a newly minted Shanghai resident. My work at Shanghai was for a company called 4Com, and I was their second American intern. From the first day of work, I was treated like family. Quite literally, sometimes my coworkers would have conversations with me entirely in Mandarin before looking at me for an answer and realizing that I hadn't understood a word they said. I'd cough, and the next morning I'd have tea in a little pile of cough drops sitting on my desk. So they were really looking out for me, and it was good to know. And after 3 months of working for 4Com, it's not surprising to me that everyone who works there becomes family. Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. in the morning until 7 p.m. at night, which often turned into 10 p.m. at night, my colleagues were at work. The work we did involved exporting outdoor equipment to US, European, and Australian companies, such as Cabela's, Gander Mountain, and Northern Tool. A typical weekday for me would involve getting up at 6 a.m., taking the subway at 7 a.m., to the stop where 4Com's shuttle bus would pick me and my coworkers up, driving us the additional hour to our office building at 9 a.m. At 12 p.m., we would all climb up to the 4th floor for lunch, which was always cooked for us by my boss's uncle, David. He was an amazing chef, and although he didn't speak a lick of English, he always laughed when I tried to tell him how good the vegetarian dishes were, because he made really, really good food. Lunch was always followed by a few rounds of foosball, and then it'd be back to work. At 3 p.m., we would complete our exercises, stretches, and movements. And I found the video. I wanted to just take a look and see if I could find it, and I did. So this is a more exaggerated video of what we did, but this is what would come on our speakers every single day at 3 o'clock. And everyone in the office would stand up. And the first day that they did this, I had no idea what was going on. No one told me it was happening. So they stand up and then they start moving. And it's a catchy song and a lot of fun. It was something that I actually looked forward to every day because it really broke up the work day. It woke you up. And what they're singing is the Chinese numbers. So it's like dance steps. So you get the point. At 6 p.m., my other boss, Vincent, would drive me back to the subway, ending my day back at my apartment around 8 p.m. each evening. It was an exhausting routine that involved consuming an excess of tea and really bad Chinese coffee. They don't have the proportions right in their espresso machine. It's really bitter, which is not my style. But it really enhanced my competitive edge in foosball. One of my main motivations for accepting an internship in Shanghai involved the opportunity to travel and see the world. It was my first time abroad, and I was intent on getting the most out of my time there. One particular weekend, I signed up for a meditation retreat through a local tourism business I had found online. They weren't your typical travel agents, and they preferred taking a very spiritual and philosophical approach to their program. A few days before departure, Jeff, our guide, sent all of us who had signed up for the trip a quote to reflect on before we arrived at our meeting spot. And it read, "What if our religion was each other? If our practice was our life? If our prayer, our words? What if the temple was the earth? If forest were our church? If holy water, the rivers, lakes, and oceans? What if meditation was our relationships? If the teacher was life? If wisdom was self-knowledge? And if love was the center of our being?" Well, soon enough, we were leaving Shanghai and we were taking a bus to Zhejiang, a mountain village about a 4-hour drive away. We arrived at 11 p.m. and we hiked up the mountain to the temple and our beds in the pitch black of a new moon. This 3-day retreat involved morning, afternoon, and evening meditation and meals with the monks, followed by free time and silence for personal reflection. Complete silence and stillness was difficult for me, and I decided on our first full day to go hike up the mountain during our 2 hours of free time. I wasn't really prepared for a hike, but I set off anyways in my open-toed sandals and with my camera. I made it about 10 minutes up the trail when suddenly it just ended. In front of me lay jungle, and there was no way to continue my hike while being able to see the ground beneath me. But my wants and my stubbornness, and I really wanted to make it up that mountain, to climb to the peak made me push on. The jungle was humid and the plants were wet, and I walked through a lot of spider webs, and it was really unsettling. But I proceeded to walk. Suddenly I remembered Jeff's warning from earlier in the morning. It was snake season during July when I had been there, and we were free to explore, but should be careful of where we're stepping. People in the village have died from these snakes' venomous bites on occasion. I stopped, I looked around, I looked back, and I realized that I'd come a really long way from the trail. Whether I went forwards or backwards, I still had a half mile to go before I could see my sandals or my feet again. My fear perhaps luckily got the best of me, and my focus shifted. I was intent on getting back to the trail, and I powered through. Back to where I knew deep down I should have turned around. Step by step, my socks were really wet with the moisture my sandals exposed them to, and suddenly, I think you can guess what happens next. There was a snake. I stepped on it, I ran into it. As a little background, I'm not afraid of snakes. For my entire 8th grade year, I tried to convince my mom to let me purchase a ball python, because who wouldn't want a cuddly 5-foot reptile 10 years down the road when they're 22? That made sense to me. My mom never let that one slide, but the snake that I encountered in China really shook me. Over my feet, I watched it shoot for 4 seconds and 4 feet of it. I watched it slither through the forest, and I was frozen. This wasn't a hypothetical anymore. There were snakes during snake season, and I just had a close encounter. The next 30 minutes I spent inching my way back to the trail, carefully analyzing every step that I made. When I returned to the temple, I was still shaken up, so I grabbed my journal, and I began to write and record my thoughts on the encounter. I mentioned, I know very little about the forest in China, and even less about the animals that inhabit it. This experience has reminded me that this temple, these forests, and this place, it's not my home, it's theirs, and I need to be more respectful of that. By aimlessly trekking my way through the woods, I was looking to see as much as I could, when I should have been looking to understand as much as I can. There's a big difference between the two. I learned something really important in this moment. Seeing was my initial goal coming to China. I wanted to power through and do as many things as I possibly could. Always doing. Because if I didn't see as much as I thought I could have, I couldn't be happy with myself for the day. It was time wasted. This experience, followed by the value of many others, it changed my perception, and it shifted my thought to challenge myself to value the understanding over merely seeing. Like I said, there's a big difference between the two. You might see someone going through something different, looking different, talking different, doing something differently, but that doesn't mean we understand how, why, in what context, or in what capacity that difference is taking place. The second point I want to mention is that it's patience and not force that makes it up the mountain. I wanted to go hard up that mountain. I wanted to stand at the peak and be able to look down and see everything as if I was climbing in the Arboretum. I was not climbing in the Arboretum. And understanding the context of where I was takes time, and it takes patience and the willingness to listen to others. In my case, Jeff. The remainder of the time I spent at the temple with the monks and the other travelers, I slowed down. And as I slowed down, I began to recognize more than I had before. The little lizard in there. I began to set aside my need to control what I was experiencing, and I allowed the experiences with those around me to foster deeper thought and understanding. Now, the Summer for Global Internship programs ask us to do digital stories to kind of summarize our experience at the end of the programs. So I've included both of mine from China and Bosnia, and that's what we're going to watch next. So a final story from my experiences that I want to share with you today involves my internship in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The summer following graduation at CSB, I traveled to Bosnia to work for a nonprofit Catholic youth organization focused on educating future generations on issues such as addictions, religious tolerance and acceptance, and building peace in local and global communities. Throughout the summer, I helped and participated in 6 camps. The first 4 were at a parish 2 hours outside of Sarajevo, while the remaining camps took place in Sarajevo at the Catholic school. While my time in China was very individualistic and required me to constantly be thinking on my feet or planning my next move, my experience in Bosnia and Herzegovina seemed almost the exact opposite. My feet were already up, and my next move was already planned. The amount of free time I had was exasperating, and the majority of my summer, I was locationally bound to the small parish town just outside of walking distance from any of those surrounding it. Our camp community, which consisted of anywhere between 6 to 56 individuals, depending on if there was a camp going on, they were my support system for the first 4 camps. Every hour of every day was spent working with the same volunteers, and over a very short period of time, we came together as a team and really relied on one another heavily as we experienced the ups and the downs of camp. Having to deal with the fact that the children from Little Milestones, a no-cost camp for orphan children, were returning back to lives of uncertainty, transition, and oftentimes having to deal with problems that children should never have to face. Experiencing intolerance for individuals, for whole groups of people, based off the fact that they were gypsies or Muslims or homosexual, and therefore removing any responsibility from themselves to help their suffering or their needs. As volunteers, we grappled with questions and discussions about our ethical and moral responsibility to the issues of reconciliation and reconstruction that both those within and outside of the country believed needed to happen. All while trying to balance the amount of time and energies our lives back home took up in our minds. As with any experience, there are challenges presented and opportunities to be found, and while I struggled with keeping my own uncertain future out of my mind while in Bosnia, I constantly dared myself to begin each day anew. After the 6 weeks of camp, we moved back into Sarajevo, and there were now over 150 participants from 15 different countries. These final 2 weeks of camp, titled Go for Peace, consisted of workshops, team building activities, and conversations around how to live out peace in our daily lives. The camp ended with a musical streetlight that we performed for VIPs such as the Archbishop of Sarajevo, one of the Bosnian presidents, and a few members of the EU Parliament. My summer in Bosnia and Herzegovina taught me and continually challenges me to remember the importance of forming relationships and close ties with those around you. On a personal level, the summer pushed me to adapt and be immersed in a culture of relax, there will be more time, have some coffee. When my reality was I was coming home to no job. Which, as a side note, before the final week of camp, I accepted the fellowship position within Intercultural and International Student Services. Upon hearing about my good news, I came back to camp, and in our evening circle, I was greeted with literal cheers. I held back my tears of happiness and some shock as people who I'd only known for a few weeks experienced how proud they were of me and how excited they were for my future. At a time when my family and friends couldn't physically be there for me, here was our camp community, reaching out not only for my joys, but for others as well, through news of nephews being born, efforts being acknowledged, and every individual being heard. If it sounds like an incredibly idealistic 2 weeks at camp, coincidentally titled Go for Peace, it's because it was. And I'd like to wrap up my Bosnia story with you by sharing my big list of little things. Time at camp was often challenging for me as I searched for meaning behind what felt like just bumming around for hours at a time. I'd like to say that I always took it gracefully and thought that there was a bigger picture or a bigger purpose, but I didn't. So I sought to reframe this feeling in a new light, and what challenges you changes you. So I began my list of looking, recognizing, and valuing just even the littlest thing that I could take away from each day. So I have 5 things on my list. And the first is to show others care and appreciation each day. For each camp, we were randomly selected a name, and we were to be that person's guardian angel. Every day we'd do something to show this person that there was someone looking out for them and someone invested in their well-being. Number 2 was to listen more. Pretty self-explanatory, but listening is the basis for empathy and for connection. It's interesting because even though I didn't understand the majority of what was being said, by listening, people felt more connected to me and like we were friends, regardless of if I understood the language. Number 3 and 4 kind of tie together and have a slightly interesting story that go along with them. I taught Zumba. I was their Zumba instructor at the camps, and the kids loved it. One particular day, we were at the water park, and we were there for 8 hours. We were there the entire day. The water was cold. The park had just opened. It was cold outside. It was windy. We were all bored. So I was drinking coffee, and the kids came up to me after a few hours, and they begged me to do Zumba. Doing Zumba at a water park isn't necessarily in my comfort zone, so I told them that we didn't have our music and I wasn't sure how this was going to work. 10 minutes later, they came up to me and they said that the water park employees had agreed to play our music from YouTube over the sound system at the water park. So we Zumbaed and we landed on the water park's Facebook page and we were a hit. So, number 3 and 4, to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, especially when you don't feel like it. It leads to accelerated growth and greater learning. And my 4th point is that you can make fun anywhere, anytime. The 5th item on my list came from our last camp, Go for Peace. One of the participants, Valmir, talked about a conversation he overheard going on during our service work. One of the campers asked for help and the other responded, "It's my pleasure to help you any day." Valmir asked us to imagine a world where this was our daily mantra. It's my pleasure to help you any day. So then I have my digital story for Bosnia. And I think you'll notice it has a different vibe than the China video. So it's much more relational. I think it gets some of the differences between the two.
You are my summer. There is no other. I wanna let go. It's summer in Montenegro. But nema Švajcarska i Australija. Ono što ima.
Alrighty, sorry. Try and get this back up really quickly.
Were you sleeping in those tents, or did you have more permanent?
We only slept in the tents for the last 2 weeks. So during the first 4 weeks, we stayed in. So the parish, the little parish community, the priests live in a house right next to the church, and we stayed. It was almost more like a hotel or like a hostel type setting. So we had rooms and beds for the first 4 weeks, and then the last 2 weeks we shifted from helping to participating, and that's when we stayed in the camps, or in the tents, because they wanted us to be with all the other campers. I can't get to load, I'll just skip it too. Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna do that. Okay, well, I'll just keep going, and we'll see if it pops up. I don't have any more pictures anyways, but maybe if we have time at the end, we can finish watching the video. But I chose to share the 3 stories with you today because in some small or large way, these experiences have impacted who I've become as an individual and the lens through which I view the world. Of course, there are many other instances that have affected who I am as well, but this isn't really the time or the place to talk about my short 22 years since I have a lot of living left to do. I think it's worthy to mention that while my stories came from experiences abroad, that there's equally, if not many more, from my time spent in Minnesota and at CSBSJU. Stories can come from anywhere and at any time. I shared these stories with you in hopes that you'll see how important it is to share yours as well. This isn't just my opinion. Think of all the ways that storytelling can affect lives and how it has affected yours. There's strength in storytelling. An article from the Chronicle of Philanthropy notes, the ancient art of storytelling may seem quaint in an era when many outreach efforts are driven by big data, with results measured in Facebook likes and Twitter retweets. But more and more, leaders and communication consultants are concerned that organizations spend too much time numbing audiences with numbers instead of stimulating them through action and story. Another example, the Rockefeller Foundation made a $4 million contribution last year to support storytelling conferences. And Carter Roberts, the president of the World Wildlife Fund, a global environmental charity in Washington, devoted the entire foreword of his organization's 2013 annual report to extolling the power of storytelling. It's really the oldest tool in the teaching toolkit. It's an integral part of the human experience is using stories to make sense of our world. Now, as with any power structure, there's always a danger of just what norms, values, and beliefs are being passed down through story. What stories are we listening to make sense of our surroundings, and who's being left out or pushed down as a result? While researching story and the power of story, I found an article that I believe represents its power in its most positive and impactful light. The article was titled, Challenging Homophobia and Heterosexism Through Storytelling and Critical Dialogue Among Hong Kong Chinese Immigrant Parents in Toronto. A mouthful of a title. But it presents a case study in which parents took part in a program promoting parent-child communication about sexuality and to reduce post-migration conflicts within the family. The parents participating in this workshop were at a baseline where institutionalized heterosexism was a powerful force. They had worldviews in which anything non-heterosexual was abnormal and unnatural. To counter these parents' misconceptions, the researchers invited in 2 speakers, Albert, a young Chinese gay activist, and Rose, the mother of a young Chinese lesbian. When Albert shared his experience of coming out to his family, the parents asked him really stereotypical and stigmatizing questions. Were there troubles at home? Were your parents having marital problems? Did you have difficulties with your parents? How did you know you were gay? Did you learn from the media? These parents weren't able to imagine human sexuality as fluid and dynamic. They only viewed it through their heteronormative lens. However, when Rose began to share her experience as a mother, most of the parents became empathetic. She spoke of the struggles she went through when her daughter came out to her. During her sharing, Rose was tearful at times and went on to share the desire to do the best for her daughter. A collective identity was constructed through the emotional investment and desire for attachments. These parents could empathize with Rose's shared identity as an immigrant mother from Hong Kong. And it was no longer a case of Rose pleading to the parents for acceptance of her daughter, but for the emergence of a collective desire to support each other and do the best for their children who were at risk of being racialized and marginalized in their post-migration society. The researchers conclude their article by saying, storytelling is an important transformative process that promotes dialogue and debate. It's through storytelling that we construct our identities and define our social relationships in different contexts. While stories and narratives do not represent a single absolute truth, they do reflect social realities at a given point in time. So all this begs the question, where does storytelling fit in at CSB SJU? And how can we use it to become a more inclusive and a more welcoming community? Well, this is where I want the discussion and the conversation to really begin, but I think that there's 3 ways and 3 main points to start off that we can take away from story. Number 1 is through fostering a community that values authentic and genuine storytellers, and letting those who want to be heard share their voice. There's a few examples that I can think of things we're already doing that helps promote story. The first was Professor Betsy Johnson Miller's program, What's Your Story?, where students sat down and they took the time to explore their own narrative and how to put it into words and share it with others. The second is Lunch and Learns. I just went to one this afternoon, and I think they're a great way to get a different view from others, most often the monastic community, which I appreciate because I don't have their viewpoints. I don't share them, so it's something different for me to listen to things I don't know. Number 2 is by exploring and finding value in our own narratives. When we listen to others' life experiences, especially those who've experienced life differently from our own, we have an opportunity to compare and contrast and make sense of their stories, and then form a deeper understanding of who we are and where we fit into this international, global context. And lastly, I think it's really important to empathize with the experiences of one another. We may not speak the same language or share the same religious beliefs or backgrounds, but it's amazing how similarly we all experience life events, hard times, challenge, and the ability to persist. So all stories need to have endings, and if you only take one thing away from today, let it be this: your story is waiting, and your listeners are wondering. Go tell your story, and go satisfy their wonder. I'd like to leave you with a quote, and I wish that I could pull it up on here, because as I was reading through all my stories, I ran across this, and I just kind of thought, oh, what a coincidence, how great. It's from May 23rd, 2013, while I was a junior at CSB. I say, I've been thinking a lot lately about where I'd like to work once I graduate, and I'm truly searching for a place I can be passionate, someplace I can call my second home, with people I can consider close to family. I want to feel as though the work I do attributes to a bigger concept and contributes to a better world. Through my experiences as a fellow and a resident director, I'd say I nailed it, and I'm excited to continue my narrative here for an additional year. Thank you. Well, I guess, do the 4 of you have any questions? Or any comments or just anything in general? Yeah.
I was just sorry that we didn't see your Bosnia.
Yeah, I'll see if I can pull it up on YouTube. I don't know why Prezi, it gives me that error sometimes on my own computer and then it'll work. Okay.
You are my summer, there is no other. I wanna let go, with summer in Montenegro. Ma nie masz Szwajcarska i Australia, ona stoi ma modra gatia. balkansko i more jadransko. Svima ću pričati da moje leto si. Summer in Montenegro. Pokaži mi, mapi nađi mi, gde su plati talasi, gde ljudi lepši su, dok se mi uzmu, dva puta me nalasi. Ove leto je 3 put vrelije, naše devojke su vatrenije, tu su drugovi, tu je obala, sa mnom nisi sve probala. Summer in Montenegro. Ma nemaš Francuska ni Australija, ono što imamo, draga ti i ja, to srce balkansko i more jadransko. Svima ću pričati da moje leto si.
الذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم أعظم درجة عند الله وأولئك هم الفائزون.
Naše devojke su vatrenije, tu su drugovi, tu je obala, sa mnom nisi sve probala. Summer in Montenegro. Ma nemaš Švajcarska ni Australija, ono što imamo, draga ti i ja, to srce balkansko i more jadransko. Svima ću pričati da moje leto si. By the seashore, my babe's so behind, we call it C4. Have we met before? Wait up, we need more. We need more ice, we need more lights, we need more reason to celebrate life. Is it Dolce Vita, Dolce Gabbana? Without you, Dolce's nada. Ma nema Švajcarska, ono što imamo, to srce balkansko i more jadransko. Svima ću pričati da moje leto si. Pokaži mi, mapi nađi mi, gde su plati talasi, gde ljudi lepši su, dok se mi uzmu, dva puta me nalasi.
They had like camp songs to call all the kids to dinner or to any like activity that we were doing, and this was one of them. So there was a Shakira song and then one from Greece and Happy. So there was certain songs that we just got really sick of. But, yeah. Well, thank you guys for coming. Feel free to stick around and grab some food if you want. I don't know what they'll do with it afterwards, but I appreciate.
All it to the residence hall with you.
Yeah.
Thank
No, I
you,
appreciate you
Gretchen.
guys coming.
I enjoyed it, thanks.
Have a good evening.